So I think in terms of personal goals for 2016, I think there are kind of three elements. Um, Now that we have the technology in and the shared service centre up and running, there's a big pull from the business to make sure we stay focused on the basics, but leverage the technology and the shared services to focus on the basics. So what I mean by that is make sure that attrition, recruitment, and some of those kind of operational processes are seamless and fit for purpose. So, sleeves rolled up, back to basics type stuff is one. The second is around further leveraging technology. So we've just hired a new head of HR technology, and she joins us in 4 weeks. And the mandate for her is to further optimise and drive out more progressive technology interventions. We're in the process of discussions with some cloud-based suppliers of how we want to push that out further. And the third is around this notion of analytics and predictive analytics. So we've got a data scientist joining us in 2 weeks. And what we're planning to do there is move away from this one-size-fits-all interventionist type HR solution culture and actually use predictive analytics to identify where we think, for example, talent might be likely to leave us, or where we have an absence problem, and take the interventions and put the interventions in place before they become issues. There's a very different way of addressing and dealing with kind of HR type issues, and leveraging the technology and the data that comes from the technology. So they're the three things: fix the basics, leverage the technology, and preempt through data what we might need to work on. So in terms of the areas where I'm focused on development and growth, I think there are two dimensions. I think on a pure kind of delivery technical dimension, amongst this world of technology and progressive HR, it's easy sometimes to lose sight of the basics, the operational bread and butter of being an HR director and leading an HR function. So from a kind of technical, kind of operational delivery, that's a big area of focus for me, and it forces you to get back to the basics. So that's a kind of a key area of delivery and focus. I think the kind of second element as it relates to me as a leader and as an HR director, on a very personal level, I have a tendency to want to move really, really fast. So often anticipating answers to questions before I've even asked the question. And that's an area where, I need to slow down slightly, think differently, pause for reflection and pause for thought, and realise it's as important to actively engage and actively listen and get the broader range of views and insights before forming opinions and making judgments. So in terms of how I make sure that innovation and disruption features in the day-to-day world of HR in my team, I guess is as follows. I think number one, it is about leadership, and it's about the conditions of leadership to create energy, create passion, recognise where people have been courageous enough to take tough decisions or come up with the next big idea. So I think, number one and foremost is around my leadership and that of my leadership team to create the conditions for that to exist. I think second has to be technology. I think, I have a firmly held belief that the combination of technology and data create further conditions for us to be disruptive, because it's the digitisation of processes, the digitisation of ways of working, of HR interventions, not all but some, allow us also to think differently about the day-to-day service offering from HR. So I think the combination of having the right leadership that's incentivised to think differently, in some cases to take risks and sometimes get things wrong, and it's okay to get things wrong, together with technology and an understanding of how to use technology. Because certainly as I look back over my career, we've all had certain HR systems that we've always kind of loathed to touch and use. So this is about having an aptitude and being comfortable with HR technology and using it to disrupt how we work. So in terms of my leadership style, I take my responsibilities as the leader of the team really, really seriously. So first and foremost, it's hiring an A team. So having the best team that I can find. Number one. Number two is around creating the emotional connection with each of them, understanding what drives them, what motivates them, and setting unambiguous expectations on what they need to do and how they need to behave. Next is recognition, and as it relates to what they do really well, and being clear with them if there's areas that we can work together on to improve. I think coupled with that is energy, passion, fun, and making this a team a great place to be. And I would hope that if you were to pulse my team and ask them, that they would say Gareth is very clear around expectations and standards of performance. He is really clear with me around what he does expect. He recognises and rewards when great things happen, and equally deals with things when they don't. So they're the kind of characteristics of me and my leadership. And I have those expectations of all and everyone in my HR team. And I also have those expectations of the rest of the exec here at Travelex, because they're the more progressive elements of leadership. And there is that book that's written, Why Should Anyone Be Led by You? And it talks about the emotional conditions for leaders to exist, and how important it is for the followers to be led by somebody that can emotionally connect. And that, as a principle, lies at the heart of my leadership.
Do you think your style has changed?
I think my style has changed, and to some extent it's been forced to change. Interestingly, I think there are kind of macro issues, external issues that force us to change. Technology actually has forced me to think differently, and to change both in terms of style and expectations. I think the world we now live in, a globalized economy, that too requires me to think differently, situationally actually, about the cultures. I have a team across 30 countries, so making sure across those countries I'm respectful and I understand that perhaps the JFDI approach sometimes doesn't work, and in other cultures it does work. So for me, I've had to grow as a leader, become more emotionally intelligent, to make sure I get the best from my team. So in terms of the difference between perhaps a national HR director and a global HR director, I think there are a number of perhaps noteworthy reflections. I think the first one would be just the complexity of leading a global team. So at a practical level, being available to do calls and available for the different markets. So Australia is a big part of the Travelex group, and there's a big time difference, so being on calls and being available. The Middle East is another big part of the Travelex group. Their weekend is Friday and Saturday. So it presents some kind of lifestyle challenges around being available and dealing with issues as and when they arise. So I think that's one practical dimension. The next is around how I've developed as a leader in terms of understanding the cultures, the ways of working, legislation as it relates to employment, understanding what the motivational drivers are for different people in different countries and different cultures. And what it's meant is that, and I think gone are the days actually, certainly in a global role, where one size fits all, whether it's a leadership program, whether it's a set of ways of working, whether it's a different learning product that we're trying to develop. Because when you're dealing with a culture on a national basis, 70% is usually good enough. I think when you're dealing with 30 countries, 30 cultures and 30 different types of people and ways of working, it presents some leadership challenges in the form of what you do, how you do it, where do you put your investments, and how do you then galvanise the global HR team and the global business. So it's challenging. It's one of the biggest, and probably is one of the biggest challenges I've ever had as an HR director. And what's, I think, very unique about Travelex, this really is global. So this is about being on those calls. It is about responding to those emails, and it is about being on the plane every other week, traveling to these markets, and being seen and being heard. I think in terms of how and why HR need to be bold and courageous, I think amongst the world of being busy and HR being expected to do this, that and everything else, one thing lies at the core of what we do, and that's to hold the moral compass and the moral integrity of the business and do what's right. So first and foremost, the role of HR is to hold the mirror up to the organisation, to leaders, and where people aren't behaving appropriately and or where people aren't behaving in line with the values of the business, the HR function and the HR team need to feel comfortable, be courageous and stand up for what's right, and know that the most senior person in HR, so the HR director, is going to provide the air cover and the conditions for those individuals to stand up for what matters. And I think that's really, really important. And I think, from that then comes difficult conversations, challenging the status quo around capability, challenging the status quo around enacting and delivering change. And all of those things take confidence and take courage. And what's really, really important, as I've already said, the role of the HR director and the role of the HR leadership team, and indeed the role of the CEO, need to create the conditions where HR has the right to stand up for what's right. So in terms of HR skills of the future, some of the core capabilities that I think are important and becoming ever more important, I think there are several things. First and foremost, without question, bread and butter HR operational skills. There is no deviating away from the fact that, in my experience, the solid and the best performers will have been in the sleeves rolled up type activity, disciplinaries, grievances, dealing with complex cases, understanding how to navigate through that day-to-day grind that no matter who you are and where you are in HR, you have to face into, including myself. As we then kind of got the value chain and think about how we become more progressive, I think being comfortable with technology and data. I think gone are the days where an HR professional can't and won't engage with HR technology. I think you have to get comfortable with it, you have to understand it, and you have to be an advocate of it. Because it's the way forward. As part of that then is the data, because the data comes out of the technology. So being comfortable at a very practical level, how to navigate data, so how to use Excel, how to do trend analysis, how to feel comfortable to recommend insights from the data that you use and that you see. And develop what I call fact-based influencing, so hypothesis-led intervention. Sounds very kind of management talk, but what I mean in practice is use the data to drive HR interventions and HR type conversations with your business partners. I think the third element is around change agency, change management. So I think a core capability is and are those change management and those communication skills, very much linked to emotional intelligence. So whether it's the business restructuring itself or the business implementing a new technology product or platform, it's being able to work with the business to understand the people and organisational impacts of that change, and then developing the interventions with the wider HR team and the business to make that change happen. So I think the combination of the bread and butter operational skills together with technology and data and change management are the core capabilities of the kind of HR profession of the future.
And do you feel that all your HR team have to be commercially astute, as in understanding the business, or is that dependent on the level they're operating at?
I think it's a really good question. I think that there's that old school term as it relates to HR should be strategic, HR should be, have commercial acumen. I think what it comes down to in layman's terms is understand the business, understand the economics of the business at a very simple level. So that isn't about understand the P&L or the balance sheet per se, but it is about understanding what drives profitability, the levers you can pull to manage cost, the levers you can pull to drive employee productivity. That's what I think commercial means in the world of HR, and certainly in my team, I do expect everyone to understand those things. In terms of whether I and my team are more effective because I sit on the executive committee of Travelex, I think it's an interesting question. I think yes, it is, because of the clout that comes with being seen as an equal amongst my peers and having a voice at the table. So first and foremost, there's no question that by being around that table and having the ear of each of the other exec members and the CEO allows me and my team to be more effective. But what I would say is that if you have the right HR director that has the capacity to influence in a very, very effective way, so excellence in stakeholder management, the ability to navigate through organisational politics. I often believe and have seen and know some really good examples actually of where individuals can be, in most cases, equally as effective, and in one particular case, because they don't sit on the executive committee, they can be more effective because actually it gives them the license to operate in a different way by perhaps answering some of the questions that no one else wants to ask, or to position themselves in a different way. So I think there are swings and roundabouts, but certainly in the cases it relates to me and my role, I think being part of the executive committee does help. So in terms of how I think HR can and should go up the value chain as it relates to technology, I think is as follows. I think, as I've said and maintain, operational HR is key, so doing the basics and doing them well. But as technology allows us to either remove waste in processes or automate processes or drive to self-service, I think there's an opportunity for HR to play in the value add space, whether that relates to the use of data, and in an ideal world, predictive analytics, and I think we're just starting that journey, or working with line managers around change, whether that's improving the bench strength of their leaders and the technical skills of people in the organisation, or whether that's about challenging the status quo around ways of working and operational efficiency and productivity of the workforce, or getting better at predicting as it relates to skills and capabilities of the future. So I think as you look at the value chain of HR moving from partner to player, I think the use of technology with the removal of admin, the removal of inefficient processes will allow the HR team to be that player that we all want it to be. But with that comes the requirements of HR to upskill and develop both the behavioural capabilities and the technical capabilities to do what the business needs. So in terms of what next and where next for technology, there's quite a lot happening in this space. As I've said, we are hiring a new head of HR technology, which will bring in some thought leadership and challenge some of our current thinking. But there's a number of things going on which are pretty exciting. So in terms of Workday, our strategic intent and ambition is to consolidate everything onto Workday, both from a cost efficiency perspective, a maintenance perspective, and a value proposition perspective to all of our employees. So we have just started the process of implementing Workday UK payroll with an ambition to move that into other key Workday payroll markets. We'll be one of the first to market on that proposition. So that's really exciting, and that's live with a view to go live in June. The second thing that we're looking to do is then implement both the recruitment and resourcing modules of Workday and time tracking globally. And incrementally, what I can see us doing is having literally everything on Workday as it relates to the hire to retire life cycle. And again, it drives efficiency, it drives a better employee experience. So that's happening certainly over the next 2 years with the focus on Workday payroll for the first 6 months of this year. In addition to that, we're looking at some other pretty progressive software interventions. So we have just completed a controlled pilot of what's called Happiness Works. Happiness Works is a technology platform around employee engagement. So we have now got rid of our annual employee engagement survey. We are going to fortnightly 90-second pulses where we pulse the entire organisation and ask them to tell us how happy they are on a rating of 1 to 10. Then off the back of that rating, they get the opportunity to engage with their line manager on a dynamic message board about practical actions that that line manager can take to make them more happy. Let me give you an example. In our trial in Sydney Airport that's just been completed, our colleagues told us that they weren't that happy because they didn't have visibility of the daily roster. So we practically put the roster up on the wall. So this isn't about big, glamorous, fancy employee engagement surveys. This is about small incremental changes that make the lives of our sales consultants better. So that's happening, and we go live with that in 6 weeks. Globally, all markets. Second is our new recognition platform. So we're moving again to a cloud platform around employee recognition. So gamification principles as it relates to allocating points for recognition, and then points mean prizes in the form of vouchers and or something that you can select from this platform. And the ambition here is really clear. It's to give all of our employees a more seamless and better experience in Travelex, whether that's in the form of core HR data through Workday and payroll, whether that's employee engagement in the form of Happiness Works, or recognition and rewards as it relates to our new reward and recognition platform, with a view that we are sticking to cloud. Everything is cloud. So in terms of what organisations and others can perhaps learn from the Travelex story, and let me break it down into two. So Travelex is going through a wholesale digital transformation. We are radically trying to become, a digital business. And some of the learnings that I take away from that and can share are around as follows. Number one is around hiring talent. So the terms and conditions, the reward, the employee value proposition, the learning culture, they are the millennial ingredients of what we have had to confront. So how do we hire the best developers, the best UI, the best UX, the best product managers from Twitter, from Facebook, from Google? And that's been a real HR leadership challenge when you're working with legacy processes, policies and ways of working. Together then with the cultural dynamics of here we have a legacy business on one side, and on the other we have a progressive, digital, agile business, and trying to bring the two together whilst respecting and recognising that they are two different business models to some extent is an HR director challenge. And there is no silver bullet, there is no easy answer. And the way we've tried to tackle that is by making sure that there is a level of awareness, there is a level of communication, and there is a level of agreement around the deliverables from both sides of the two different elements of the business. So, in our desire and ambition to become the digital business that we're seeking, it's a real and has been a real HR and business challenge, and it's a journey that I relish to some extent. But it's challenging the norms, it's challenging the thinking and the ways of working in how HR needs to be set up and fit for purpose for the future. In terms of the digital transformation of HR, so we're 3 years into that journey, and I think it's fair to say, and I've said this on the record previously, it's been bloody hard work, really challenging. And I think amongst this world of technology and getting carried away with mobile first, sexy apps, sexy look and feel, it's easy sometimes to lose sight of the operational basics. And that's a learning that I've taken with me and continue to some extent have the scars of, about making sure that there's the right balance between the day-to-day delivery of operational HR together with the more progressive nature of the transformation. As it relates to the implementation of the change and those conditions for success, I think they come in different forms. The first is leadership. So as with any transformation where you're trying to put a new global platform in 30 countries, taking 2,000 processes down to 180, which we achieved, it requires you to hold your nerve. It requires you to stay focused. It requires you to galvanize your team, incentivize your team, and create the conditions for success, and we did that, and I think we did that well, albeit it was really painful. The next element was a change in the operating model for the business as a result of the digitisation of HR, and by that I mean we were requiring the business to become self-service, so line managers now to access business processes as they relate to HR, data, ways of working via technology. So gone are the days where you expect HR to do the admin or HR to, police process. Instead, we're expecting self-service to play its role, albeit we put it onto mobile for line managers. And as you would expect through any change, there is resistance to that, both in terms of education, awareness, and ways of working. And I don't think we've quite nailed that yet, and I think we're still in that process of awareness, trying to help line managers understand the benefits of technology, and I think that will always be an ongoing kind of continuous improvement, reinforcement type process, but that's been really challenging as well. One of the other things that I think is interesting has been the energy you can create with your HR team by being progressive. So thinking and feeling that you're making a difference, trying to implement best-in-class technology, trying to bring HR into the digital age, and trying to see HR as a leader in this digital economy, not a follower, I think is pretty exciting. And I'm really proud that my team got the industry awards that it did over the last couple of years as a result of our ambition and what we've achieved. But I'm always reminded that let's never lose sight of the core basics of HR and our responsibilities in doing what we need to do.